Hey, Ecamm fam. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. And hey, thank you so much. We had so much going on in the world of Ecamm that we had to move this to an hour later than normal. And we're doing a little bit of a different format for today's episode. So hopefully, I think we have enough flow riders in the comments that can help us with this particular project. As many of you know, Doc is in San Diego. He's at Social Media Marketing World with a whole slew of our favorite people who are speaking and sponsoring and participating in that event. And we've been talking about doing a mailbag episode for a while. And the original concept was that we were going to have you all send in questions and we would record an episode that we could use for when things get really crazy like today, so we could just be off and not be live streaming if we were too busy or things happened. But I figured I'm available today, and I'm looking at the weather now. It's still holding out. My power has not yet gone off here in the middle of a typical New England snowstorm. So I thought, what better way than to just live record? That's what we do, right? So we're going to live record everyone's questions, and we will turn this into our mailbag episode. And if we get a whole bunch of questions, then we can use some of these to create, future recorded episodes that we can kind of keep in the back closet for when another one of these opportunities pops up. But I am here hanging out, and our very special guest, we are pulling our incredible producer out from hiding behind the scenes to help out here. We have Luis hanging out with me today as my impromptu co-host. Hi, Luis.
How you doing, Katie? Happy to help as always.
Doing great. I'm doing great. So this is going to be a different kind of show, Louise. So I think, no holds barred. Normally we keep all of our Q&A to the end of the episode because we trim it out. We don't let our listeners hear all of the questions that happen here in the live chat on YouTube. But today, drop in all of those questions, everyone, because we are going to talk all about podcasting in general, video podcasting, how we do what we do. But we're going to answer all of your questions so that all of your questions and all of our answers are hopefully great answers can help out people who are listening who are not hanging out here in the live chat. And
Absolutely.
I wish we had recorded our as usual. I wish we had recorded our behind the scenes sound check because we were talking all about sort of like the logistics of it all, and you were giving me such great ideas for our test studio space. And yeah, maybe we'll just do like an episode that's just the behind the scenes casual stuff. It would be really fun.
Yeah, I do think we should have recorded it. That's, something that, we're going to try to figure out how we get those recordings before we go live,
Yeah.
um, because that's also content that we could repurpose. And that's
Yeah.
all part of everything that we do here, trying to maximize what we do. But I think that we could have a lot of fun today, just, or maybe we could even go over the same things that we spoke about. So we
Yeah.
can reference them. But yeah, there's so much that goes in the behind the scenes and the sound check, that
Yeah.
I always want to be able to share because there's a lot of good information there as well.
Yeah, I feel so for if you're new, or even if you've been a flow rider since day one with us, the flow and the format of this show is that we record live using Ecamm out across YouTube, and we live stream usually for about an hour and a half every Tuesday, usually at 12 p.m. Eastern. But we switched it up and made Doc sad because we had another live stream earlier in today. But we switched it up. But our normal flow is that we stream, we live stream. And a lot of why we do that is because for a few different reasons, right? It keeps us real. So on days like today where things are going a little bit wrong and we have, team members traveling and everything is like a little bit up in the air, we still know we need to show up. We have flow riders who are here. They have questions that, they're here hanging out in the chat. The second is that it makes the process really easy for us, right? So even if I say the wrong things or we babble on about things that are not super relevant, Louise can edit all that out. And that doesn't necessarily have to be part of our final episode or replay episode or any of the audio that we send out to any of our podcast hosts. And it lets us, test and play and see, how video and live video and audio and all of these different formats can work together really cohesively. And it's a great starting point. So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I want to get into podcasting, but it really feels daunting. You know, I have to have all the right gear, I have to know what I'm doing, it has to be really heavily edited. It really doesn't. It can be a really iterative process. I was laughing with my friends this weekend who they've been like editing their podcast, you know, a ton. They're doing a really great job. They were asking like how I was managing my personal podcast that my best friend and I do one on Thursday nights. And I'm like, I live stream it and then I grab the video file and I just upload it. I don't do any editing at all because that podcast for me is fun and needs to be like raw and authentic. And
Hmm.
I don't really mind if we have ums and ahs in it or if we go off on a tangent. I see, you know, because I think really the point of that podcast is really just meant to be fun and to geek out over movies. And so I don't spend that time there. I'd rather spend my time on, you know, preparing the content, watching the movies that we're going to review, you know, making sure that everything looks and sounds its best over really deep diving and editing. So it's important to think through that vision, right, of what you're trying to do, and how you're going to accomplish it. We've done that a lot on the show. You've given us some great suggestions, Louise, on how like we can step it up and make it make it a little bit better every time, make it a little bit easier. I feel like we're all on the how do we
Yeah.
make it easier, right?
Well, I think that that's part of the human condition, so to speak. Like, we're always not looking to be lazy, but to be the most efficient in everything that we do. Because even if it's something as, commonplace as cooking dinner, we're always going to try to figure out, the mise en place or the meal prep,
Yep.
something that we're going to do to try to make that experience or the chore that we have to do of cooking into the most easiest, efficient, flowing, experience that you can get when it comes to everything that we do. So
Yeah.
the more that we do the podcast, the more that we experience this action, is the more we start, kind of grinding the gears in our mind and figuring out solutions to problems that only we are encountering because we're constantly doing this. For
Yeah.
example, it was last September where I actually took over the duties for producing the podcast, which
Yeah.
that totally changed the dynamic of everything that's been going
Yep.
on here, because I feel it's made it a lot easier for you and Doc to
Mhm.
just, no matter how busy you guys are, which you guys are very busy, that to still have the ability to just like make that phone call and
Yeah.
call in and have the conversation and not worry about all the behind the scenes and the audio and the switching and the whole production that could be daunting to a lot of people and
Yep.
could be what put them off from starting something like this in the first place. Even though you guys had that, it made it even that much easier to be able to just take that off of your plate and just say, all I have to do is show up and have the time slot dedicated to have the conversation with Doc, and then from there on out, everything else gets taken care of. And through the production aspect,
Mhm.
I have the files right away, even though certain times I still wait for you guys to upload it. But, when it comes down to it, if I really needed to produce something out of anything, I have all the files that I need to work with as soon as we're done. And that flow totally smoothed out a lot of wrinkles that we were having ourselves when it came to producing this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not familiar with the concept of, you know, production or remote production, what we were doing prior is that Doc or myself was the one who was using Ecamm to actually, you know, schedule and set up the video and then run, you know, and then actually run the show, right? So it was causing some level of distraction because when you are the one who is operating the show, right? You're checking the comments, you're checking to make sure the sound levels look good, everything looks good on screen. You're doing that at the same time as trying to have a conversation and to co-host and get the content out. That can be a lot to manage. And also it means that if anything was to go wrong with my, you know, my internet or Doc's internet or, you know, something was to happen, then that would be it for the feed, right?
Hmm.
So we wouldn't have any kind of, we wouldn't necessarily have any kind of backup. So So we switched it, and Luis is the one who actually is using. I mean, we're all using Ecamm, but Luis is the one who's using Ecamm to actually stream, to broadcast our podcast out. What that means is then when the stream is done, Luis is just sitting behind the scenes, so he's not on camera. He's doing all of the kind of camera switching and scene switching. He's putting comments on screen and kind of making sure everything goes smoothly. But it means that if like Doc or I were to drop off, we'd drop off. Luis could just, put up an image, change the scene so that it was just one of us, and then work behind the scenes to get that other person back up and running while the other one was still up driving the show. It means that then the file wouldn't be destroyed, and we wouldn't lose any of that content. And we have the backups, right? Because Doc and I are both still recording on our end. So we're
Yes.
we're creating all of these, we're creating a level of efficiency. We're also creating kind of a level of security if anything is to
Yeah,
happen.
redundancy.
Redundancy, right? We have all of these different files. And like you said, I think what's actually best about it is it also created this really wonderful experience and let us practice doing more robust tech checks, really kind of thinking through as a team, like, what do we want to get out of it? What do you need to be able to edit these files to make them into a really effective podcast? What do Doc and I need to be able to show up and really be able to focus on the content? It's just a really nice option. So if you can have a producer or have someone that's there and able to help, who's kind of sitting in the wings, I just think it makes it better for everyone. And whether that's a friend or someone that you're hiring, I just really do think that even as someone who feels these days pretty comfortable on camera, and someone like Doc who's on camera all the time and creating content all the time, it's still really nice to have someone who is just make solely focused on making sure that the show goes off without a hitch and is there to remain calm when maybe you don't feel calm or things are going off the rails. So
Yeah, I love it.
Dave says he hates being late. You're fine, Dave. And
Yeah.
reminder to everyone watching with us live, this is a mailbag episode. So now is the time. Any kind of questions that are related to, video podcasting in general, gear, equipment, how to get started, promoting a podcast, anything that kind of falls under that podcasting sphere, how live streaming and podcasting can work together. Throw those questions into the chat. We'd love to answer them here so that other people can learn alongside you. So send them in. Otherwise, we'll just keep chatting.
Yeah, because, to be problem solvers, we kind of need problems. And a
Hmm.
lot of times we take care of the issues that we handle because that's our own personal flow. But what I've learned is that each person has their own setup, their own flow, and will probably have their own situations.
Hmm.
So we will never encounter certain issues that you will have because we don't have your same exact setup or same
Hmm.
exact, issue or requirement out of this equipment. So please let us know, because that's one of the things that I love to do, which is actually try to see how I would handle somebody else's problem. And I did this just like earlier today, on a call with Miles, and he was having a couple of issues. And right off the bat, like one of them was like, your keyboard shortcuts aren't working. And that's something that's so random that wouldn't be particular to a live stream, a
Yeah.
podcast, or anything. But I was still able, because it was part of his issues, his setup, to mitigate that issue. And now he was like, dude, what you just did with the keyboard and everything, that was worth all the time that we spent here. And it was just something that simple. So please let us know. And
Yeah.
but yeah, we'll continue to chat, because a thing that you mentioned that I do love is exactly that Doc and you, constantly working, constantly busy, constantly on camera and creating content. But it's also nice when you're just like the guest, right? I
Yeah.
also host the weekly podcast myself,
Yeah.
or my live stream. And when I'm doing it and I'm producing and you're bringing comments and you're reading everything, it could be a lot. And one thing that we always talk about is that life happens, because
Yeah.
something could happen. You can mute yourself, you can get a random message, or a program just clashes or opens up, accidentally. And all
Yeah.
of that is, good and fine, because we're used to it, because it's life.
Hmm.
Like Aiden, my son. will constantly be asking me for something during the live stream, and it is just what happens.
Mhm.
At the same time, oh man, I you see, like, life happens. I totally started thinking about my son and just totally blanked on the reason why I even mentioned it. You see, like, life happens. Oh,
Yeah, no, it
yeah.
it does. Yeah, there you go. Go
That
ahead.
that what I was gonna mention was that you have the redundancies that
Yeah.
no matter what's going on, even though I'm producing, right, you and Doc are still recording in the background. And what you can gain from that is a simple fact that even though things go wrong, things could be forgotten, and you can sphere off on a different tangent, you can still bring it back in the edit because let's say you were to drop off completely because due to internet issues,
Mhm.
I would get a black screen, and that's basically what I would have as my recording. But then you will also have the backup aspect of that your computer didn't lose power, it lost
Yeah.
internet. So your recording is fine, and then you're able to send that file back over to me to kind of clear all that out in the final edit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind if you are doing this kind of workflow, right? So if you're playing with recording live, wherever that's going, you need to remember that if everything goes horribly wrong and the internet dies, and it's you're not able to get that stream out or the stream gets canceled, you do still automatically, if you're using Ecamm, you have that level of redundancy where you have that recorded file. So, as best as you are able to, take a pause, or even, pause that recording, and then you figure out what you need to do, take those steps. 99.9% of all of this is remaining calm and remembering what steps you need to take to preserve the quality of your file, of the broadcast, of the guest experience, of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So, don't it's automatically a feeling of panic when something goes wrong, because we all want, a really good quality, a really good experience for our listeners or our viewers. But you need to remember that there are steps you can take to solve it. There are steps you can take to solve it live. There are backups if you're not able to solve it live. And and there's always going to be the opportunity, if it all goes horribly wrong and every single thing fails, that you can do it again. So it is really important to remember that. And the only way that you're going to get to that level of confidence is by going through it a few times, unfortunately. So the more you do it, the more you practice, the
Yep.
more it happens, whether, hopefully it happens in a sound check where it's in a safe space and you can kind of talk through together what you want to do. But I had on my podcast, my personal podcast, thankfully, so it wasn't not high stakes for my smaller podcast. But I do it in the evening, and so I had been like rushing. I had taken my kids out to go see a play, so I didn't have the usual amount of time that I normally do. But I'm like, I'm an expert. I've got this down, like no problem. I have my studio set up the way I want it in my space. I came back in. I didn't have my Sony ZV-E10 camera plugged in. I always have it plugged in. I had unplugged it to take like, the like plug to use it elsewhere, and I never plugged it back in, but it looked plugged in. The wire was going down into what looked like the wall. So I figured it was plugged in. I'm more than halfway through the podcast and my screen just goes black. Like it just went black, but I could still hear myself. I could still see everything that was going on. We were still streaming, and I looked I looked up at the camera and I saw the lens going back in. It was turning off. And I was like, just kept letting Natalie talk. She was, on a roll with what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all right, no problem. Camera's off. I don't know exactly what's going on, but right now I can switch over to my FaceTime camera. So I did that. Switched over to my FaceTime camera, realized what it was, couldn't physically get up to get another plug to be able to plug it back into the wall. So I was like, we'll just finish this episode with my FaceTime camera. Not a problem. Even though I was like looking here instead of here and here instead of here and
Mm-hmm.
looking in the wrong places, we still got the content out. It wasn't the level of disruptive that it could have been had I been like, oh my goodness, my camera is down. I need to stop the stream. We need to do it again another day. We didn't get the file. I could have interrupted Natalie and been like, something horrible is happening. I got to get up and get stuff. The remaining calm and figuring out what is the easiest way to keep going at a quality that I'm happy with is the best way that you can deal with those kinds of situations. And that took having that situation happen to me probably 2 or 3 times before I felt a level of comfort about it. So, I think it's just really important for everyone to remember that even if you've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, things are still gonna happen, and the most important thing that you can do is fall back on those redundancies, try to remind yourself to keep calm and work your way through it as best as you can.
Well, we
Oh,
have
we
a
have some
couple
great
of questions
questions.
here. Yeah, we have a
Yeah,
couple of
great.
questions, but that was an amazing story, a great example. And another example is me just right before you did that, because I did not panic on having a big brain fart, and I reverted to the previous
Yeah,
conversation, which the point that I was trying to get across, I it hit me while you were talking. I was like, yeah, it was the convenience of not having to produce,
yeah,
because we do all these things, and while you're running all of these things and you have a thought, it's that simple how you can lose track of what you were doing. And that's why it's very convenient for someone like myself that produces a live stream, produces the flow, that
mhm.
I recognize that it's so much easier to be the guest,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
When
yeah,
somebody else is doing all the pulling and everything, and you just have to sit there and listen and
yep,
answer and smile,
yep,
man, that makes it so much easier. So, from
it is.
producing my own live streams and then being guests on other people's live streams, you recognize real fast that it's a lot smoother, so
Yeah,
much more convenient to be on the guest side, to just show up
it's true.
and be yourself to present. So being able to provide that for you and Doc is something, like I said, that we take off your plate and makes
Mhm.
it that much more fun. Just right off the bat, it's so much more fun to be able to just call in, hang out, and have a conversation for an hour than having to think about all the mundane little nuances of producing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna flow through some of these questions here.
Absolutely.
Donald Weiser asks, "Have you heard Ecamm can stream at 5 megabytes?" I'm not exactly sure what the question is there. Maybe Donald, you could follow up and ask again in a slightly different way. Um, it could just be that I'm not quite as technical as Doc, so forgive me if I'm missing something that's important there.
Oh, did they put a
Bonfire
Q in front of
Sports,
it? Because I don't see it.
they did not. I'm going through.
Oh, okay, okay.
Bonfire Sports asks, I am a solo creator utilizing screen share to different web pages, etc. Think a news presentation program. Okay, that sounds awesome. Congratulations. What is the best way that I can stream it in 16 by 9 but make the repackageable vertical? Oh, I love this question because we have been playing around with this at the
Hmm.
flow. So you may not know, but we have been we quietly opened opened up a flow TikTok, and we have been playing around with editing and repurposing our video as vertical. So same situation as you. We are streaming right now in 16 by 9, but we are using that video footage to make it vertical. And Luis is the one who is helping us do the magic. So Luis, do you want to talk through just some of the, I guess as simple as you can make it steps. I know you are a professional editor, so obviously there's stuff that you're doing
Thank
that
you.
maybe editors can't do, but are there some simple
Well,
steps to take?
yeah. So you're saying as a solo creator, right,
Mhm.
utilizing screen share to do different web pages, etc. I think,
Yep.
okay, just to make sure, repackageable for vertical.
Mhm.
Perfect. Okay.
So how do you take it wide and make it vertical?
I am going to do live demo mode right now to
Mhm.
basically take you guys behind the scenes. Okay, so now you're seeing what I see, and this is just so that I can bring in one simple little folder.
Yep.
So I'm producing the podcast right now, and this is what I see, as well as while I'm presenting. I'm going to go ahead and open up this folder here, which has the majority of my Ecamm recordings.
Awesome.
And let's see, does this one have it? Oh, this is a good example just to show you what we're dealing with. When I go ahead and I do my recordings now with isolated video available on Ecamm Live,
Mhm.
you will get a copy of your recorded file here,
Yep, so it's
which
everything
is
all mixed up
basically
with our stuff.
everything on
Yep.
the production. So
Mhm.
if you have music, an intro, the comments on the screen that you pull up, everything will be embedded into this file. But then
Mhm.
you'll also get a copy, or a clean copy, of camera A and camera B, and you get to select which ones you want those to be. So whether it's
Mhm.
like an overhead shot that you are doing at the same time while you're producing or saying what you need to be said, everything here is being recorded individually. So now we're able
Mhm.
to, let's see, open this up. This is literally just a test shot.
Mhm.
And this is an individual file. You see, it's just 10 seconds of me testing.
Mhm.
And that is completely separate from the B camera, which will be recording simultaneously there as well. The
Mhm.
key feature that I want you to see is that it is in full size. So
Yep.
right now, as we're doing this podcast, as we're doing the Flow podcast recording, and
Yep.
now I can just exit live demo mode.
Mhm.
Even though we're blocked off here and we're two small little squares, at the end of the production, the file that I will have will be a complete full size image of Katie,
Yep.
a full size image of myself in individual files, and then the completed podcast, which has the overlay, like I said, the intro music,
Yeah, the
the the
graphics. Yep.
the graphics, the whole
Mhm.
thing. That's where I would absolutely utilize the repurposing, because you can take the exact content without all of the like pleasantries and all the beautification to it, and that core ISO file is what you would use to repurpose. Then you would take those two files and throw them into your editor, and you can completely manipulate it at your, at your desire.
Yeah, and so Luis has and this I think maybe a process. This might be a great like full one for us to do an entire episode on to really show the steps of it. But what Luis ends up with as a result is that so right now we are side by side because we're 16 by 9 in the vertical video repurposing of this larger file. You're using the individual full videos from isolated video to stack us. So, like, in this case, I'm on the left, Luis is on the right, but I could be on top in a vertical video and Luis on the bottom, or vice versa. And you're able to do that because you have those individual video files that don't have all of the
Mhm.
graphics and format on top of them. So,
And to
yeah, that would
clarify
be
it, what I did was I then basically recreated this graphic that we have here
like a
on the
stacked
screen,
version, a template. Yeah.
a template of the
Mhm.
stacked version. Then
Yeah.
I would go into my editor. I use Final Cut Pro, but yours of your choice.
Hmm.
And in the timeline settings is where you would adjust the way that you're going to be editing your video. And that's where you would select it to be vertical. And you
Yeah.
would take both files, you would put them on top of each other and basically center them out the same
Hmm.
way. And then you're going to throw your overlay, which is like your nice little neat packaging, which will square out each individual over it
Okay, just
with
layer
the
that.
template
Yeah.
that is set up for vertical. Then you export and you have the files that you want. Like I said, completely. You can manipulate them however you like. You can make them bigger, larger, or let's say a certain part of the podcast you had two people speaking at the same exact time, which tends to
Hmm.
happen with the online, like communication and a little bit of the latency. It could be that the person's key point kind of gets muffled because of the overlapping audio. And what you're able to do is basically mute one person or just highlight the one individual. So if Katie were to be speaking for a long period of time and I want to emphasize on an exact area that she's talking about, an exact point, I will basically remove Doc from the video completely and then just highlight where she takes up the whole screen
Yeah.
temporarily, and all that could be done in post production. That's something
Yeah.
that I could actually do right now. So to finalize the point, this entire clip where I explain that, I can now take it in my editor and basically just highlight me and make myself be the only speaker on the screen while I
Hmm.
say that in post production. Hopefully
Yeah.
that was,
Yeah, and
that
do
made
things like
sense.
burn on captions or do other different things. So yeah, there's a lot of but I love the idea of being able to do templates, because I think that'll make it really easy to repeat it every single time. So we should, I bet you we could probably even put together, if it's of interest to the group, some like basic Adobe Express or Canva templates that people could use, that are those ones that you'd layer over top of the video, because that would, I think, give people a good start of what's possible as far as templates go. But that was great.
Yeah.
That's a question I've had too, for
Here's a
even
little
some of the
pro
stuff I'm
tip
doing.
that I did on my last live stream, which is I take the templates or the layouts, the overlays that you're seeing
Mhm.
like this, and I make them in Canva very easily. But the picture hole where you're actually gonna have the camera feeding through, I
Yep.
just color that in green,
Yep.
right? I color that in green so
Then you
that
can
that
green
could be
screen it.
green screened out.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you leave the boxes in green, and then that's just my template. So whenever I go to do the edit, I throw that file into my timeline, and
Mhm.
then I throw the keyer or the co- couldn't get that word out. The chroma key remover from your editor, and you take the green out of it, and everything behind it will be displayed. And that's where you would take the clean files and adjust them and position them correctly, because that's what will be coming through, and then you basically have your finished product. So whether it's horizontal or vertical, you can create those templates, those overlays very easily in Canva or
Mhm.
your editor of choice.
Yeah, that's a great one. All right, we have a few other questions. So Tessie, hey Tessie, asks, when using virtual audio, does it have to be a mix minus setting that can be configured? That might be a question for you, Luis. I don't know if I know the answer to that one,
Okay, so
actually.
when using virtual audio, does it have a mix minus setting that can be configured? If we're talking about specifically about Ecamm, I don't think so. It
No, yeah,
depends
Ecamm does
on the
not.
unit that you're using. So you can have mix minus on like a Rodecaster Pro 2 and different audio interfaces like that.
Mhm.
If not, then you would kind of be looking into, not sure your exact scenario, but maybe the echo cancellation. So
Mm,
that's something that could be found within Ecamm, which could help to mitigate any like what we call slapback coming in through speakers
yeah.
while you're doing interviews. But when it comes to mix minus, that would be particular to the hardware that you're using.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think a lot of there's so much audio is just such a huge topic, and we all need to keep in mind that, people
Yes.
like Luis and Doc, who are really great at this, have been doing it for years and years and years and years, and prior to, even 10 years ago, the amount of skill and equipment and cost associated with being able to produce a podcast was like radio
Astronomical.
studios, right? So a lot of what we're able to do now is just amazing. So yeah, these are great questions. It's going to take us all sort of time to really figure out, like, what are you trying to get out of it? What are those steps? How do you get the best possible audio? What are the tools that you need to have? So that's great. Super great question. Kelly's on, yay!
Hi,
Kelly
Kelly.
asks, do you know of a way to capture audio from a LinkedIn audio event? I'd like to plan out a way to repurpose the content as a podcast. I love that. I mean, I think a couple of things. I haven't not tried my LinkedIn audio events myself yet. It's been on my list, but I haven't quite gotten there. But I would imagine that it functions pretty similarly to what Clubhouse did, and so I think you could certainly use Ecamm and just have that open and record on your end the video, right? And the audio coming back in, and use Ecamm to record it. Um, yeah, I mean, or yeah, I wonder if LinkedIn would eventually build out like a recording functionality to be able to save those. The one thing you're going to want to keep in mind, which you probably are already thinking about, is if you are coming in. So if folks listening or watching here don't know about Clubhouse or LinkedIn audio events, the one thing to keep in mind is that it is a public space to some level where, a number of people are coming in and having conversations. So if you are recording on your end using Ecamm or any of the other tools that you have at your disposal, you do need to be really clear, either upfront going in or when you start recording, that you are recording everyone in that room, because there is a level of um, privacy that I don't think a lot of these platforms have fully figured out yet. So you do
Mhm.
need, in the same way that you need to have people opt into an email list, you do have to have permission and people opting into allowing you to record them. So I think you can use Ecamm to do it. And Luis is nodding, so I think he's about to explain the details of how to do it. But Ecamm through like
Well,
an audio mixer would allow you to do that, right? Right, Luis? Am I missing something?
yeah. Well, there's a couple of ways. If you're able to open up Ecamm Live, make sure that through your preferences that in the audio tab that the system audio is selected and on so that
Mm,
you have the ability to record what your computer's producing. So now
right. So the,
anything
mhm.
that it sounds that it's making when you press record, it's going to record that into your video file.
Got
But
it.
these are audio rooms, so you might not want to have a video of yourself listening for an hour when you're just trying to get the audio out of it, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
If that's the way to go, that's an option that you have with the equipment and Ecamm. But in this case, it will also benefit you to have a separate recorder like a Rodecaster Pro.
Hmm.
Or in this case, I'm also using a Zoom PodTrack P4 as my audio interface. What this
Hmm.
does is that it has its own separate
Recording.
recording in it.
Yeah.
So anything that's being said by you or anything that's passing through it can be recorded into an audio file. And that big button that says record on the Rodecaster Pro, it's really
Push that
big. Just press
down.
that down while you're listening and using the Rodecaster Pro to listen to this audio program. So, it being an audio interface, as soon as you have it connected to your computer, it should be controlling all of your audio sources. And if it's there, then it's as simple as making sure that that audio program that you're listening to is being displayed on the levels on the Rodecaster, on the Zoom P Pod Track P4, and
Hmm.
press record on that recorder, and you're good to go. Then you'll
Yeah.
have an audio file ready to be repurposed for podcasts, so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
here's a tip, going back to what Katie said about the privacy with the recordings of these audio rooms, I would
Hmm.
definitely tell you to put live recording in the title of anything
Hmm.
that you're doing, and that kind of gives you
Good tip.
that first initial kind of barrier of like anyone who comes and clicks into this room should know that this is a live recording and that it's going to be repurposed. So even though you have that anonymity, so to speak, that you would have like on online spaces, that would not be applied to that room.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, and that's one we definitely saw a lot of people using back when Clubhouse was more of a
Yes.
force. So it is a great way to be able to use and leverage and repurpose a lot of that audio. But yeah, be really clear about what you're doing with it, just so that you don't run into any challenges from people who just didn't expect it. We've got some great questions coming in. Thank you so much, live audience, for hanging out. If you are listening to this later and you weren't in the live audience, we do record this live on YouTube every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. We'd love to have you hang out. But if you are not able to, or you just love the audio only format, totally hear you. You can also send us email questions, flow@ecamm.com. More than happy to answer those. You can send them by just typing them out, or you can send videos into that email as well. We'll be happy to play them and feature it in future episodes. Great questions coming through here. We have another question coming in asking if there is a solution to live streaming on TikTok with Ecamm. And then there's a follow up question about asking about live streaming in vertical. So I'm going to answer both of these at the same time because they're great, great questions. So, as many of you know, in the video space, you can create video in this 16:9 format, so this kind of widescreen format, or you can create it in that vertical kind of mobile first format, right? A tool like Ecamm actually allows you to both record and stream in either of those settings. So it's just a matter of going into whatever video recording tool you have in Ecamm. It's just within the preferences, you would just select that you're recording or you're streaming in vertical versus 16:9. I think you can actually also do it in square, but I don't particularly know why you would want to, but it's there if you want to. So there is that option. And as far as streaming out to a platform like TikTok, TikTok absolutely allows live streaming. It does have a threshold. So, like many of these platforms, you have to have a certain amount of followers or a certain amount of time on the platform or content on the platform before that feature gets unlocked. If you have access to TikTok live streaming, it functions similarly to all the other platforms. It's not built natively into Ecamm, but you can grab the stream key from TikTok and then you can use what's called RTMP streaming in Ecamm. So you would just select RTMP and Ecamm as your destination. And then you would grab the stream key from TikTok and you would drop it in. We have a few videos, I believe, on our channel. I think the ones that we have are talking specifically about Instagram, but
Yeah.
it's the same functionality. So you're able to grab the stream key from that tool or that platform, drop it into a tool like Ecamm, and you will be able to stream there. So lots of options when you're creating video, and one of the reasons why we're big believers that if you start your podcast with live streaming, you've in many ways already done kind of both like the most complicated and also the easiest first step, because once you have that video, whatever format, it makes think big first, right? So big picture first. You've done all of the video work, which is often the most complicated, and then you're really able to take that and maybe, convert that into a vertical video for promotion, or, you're able to grab the audio out of that for audio platforms. You're able to use the transcript to build a, blog post or a PDF. You're able to, send sound bites of that into Chat GPT and use it to create all kinds of like summaries or get additional questions from it or improve the YouTube description, or all the different things that you can get from that initial larger, longer form content. And if it's video first, it's just easier downstream from there than if you're starting with audio or starting with, a blog post, or starting with something that is harder than to take that and build it into a video. It's easier to start it as a video and really as a live video, and then format it all the way through, repurposing it along the way. So, but yes, you can absolutely stream in both vertical or wide formats. And you can record in vertical or wide formats. So both of those options are available to you. And as Louis said, you can start with a widescreen video and you can transfer and turn it into a vertical video. So you can do just about anything these days. It's kind of remarkable. It's all about how you can do it in a way that you can repeat week after week in a way that seems sustainable to you and efficient, so that you're not getting to that point of feeling like you've taken on so much that now you're not able to do it consistently or to the quality that you and your users and your followers and your listeners expect.
I just have to say that I
Oh,
have to give a big props to like Ken and Glenn, KNG, because these
yeah.
guys are really so on the ball that we're getting these questions and it's very easy for us to answer. Like, yeah,
We're
Ecamm
like
does
done.
that.
Yeah.
Like Ecamm does that. Like, yeah, we already implemented that with Instagram. And one of
Yeah.
the really cool features when I saw Doc make his videos on it was that even though you're broadcasting vertically to Instagram, to TikTok, and all these other
Yeah.
platforms, you're still getting a wide aspect video recorded file in the isolated video, because
Oh, yeah.
it's
So you get both.
giving you that file from the
Yep.
camera directly, not when it's already been set up. So even though you're broadcasting and it's being
Mm-hmm.
cut in vertical for the phones, if you were
Mm-hmm.
to go to Instagram on your computer, it will give you the widescreen because it's pumping out both simultaneously through Ecamm. So it's super cool
Mm-hmm.
that it caters to the device that you're
Yeah.
watching it on, and you still have access to your full files in the backend.
Yeah, which is great if you're doing something like, so let's say you're doing a video podcast and, we are on only YouTube, but if we wanted to, we could technically go to YouTube and TikTok or YouTube and Instagram. And as Louis said, on YouTube, if I was watching it on my computer, on my TV, it would show up, in the quality that you would expect in the widescreen format. But if you're watching it on, Instagram on your phone, you would see it just in that vertical format and everything would look great all the way through. But we would have, again, the kind of highest level video to be able then to, reuse and and use across a number of different ways. So yeah, and Paul was kind enough to drop in an article, so a video, excuse me, a video link showing how to use RTMP. So if you are listening and you're like, oh, I would like to do that, there are tons of resources available. The abbreviation that you want to search for is RTMP streaming. I'm like Michael, RTMP streaming, and that will show you how to grab a stream key, what's called a stream key, from any of those different platforms. and be able to use any live streaming tool. We hope you use Ecamm, but any live streaming tool should be able to allow you to grab a stream key and be able to go out to any of those platforms. And there's tons of them. I mean, for the most part, many of us are, staying or sitting on the popular platforms like, YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitch and all these spaces. But there are many, many others beyond that all use that RTMP streaming and stream keys. So yeah, some great questions coming through. I'm loving it. I always love that. I'm glad that we called this podcast The Flow, because I feel like every time we go into these questions, even when they are, technical or specific or based on gear or, something, they do all go back. And I hope you're hearing this, especially if you're new, but certainly if you've been at it for a while as well. It all goes back to like the planning and the workflows and the process behind it, because you can do anything these days. And most things you can do pretty cost effectively. Like, you don't need to have a ton of money. You can really create whatever you want to create, but you need to know the process behind it and how to make that process really work for you and really work for your goals in order to be successful. Because it's really easy to take on way too much and to try things and become really, really frustrated if you don't know what you want the final result to be. So,
Hmm.
what you want your podcast to look like and to sound like, who you want to reach, how much you want to grow, how quickly you want to grow. All of these questions are incredibly important during that planning phase, and revisiting them is incredibly important. Think, as we've said a number of times, like how we started the Flow podcast is very different than episode, what are we, 32, I think today, 30,
Yep.
32, right? 32 episodes in, and we've made those changes. We pulled Luis on as a producer, which saved us a whole bunch of time. We were actually writing blog posts off of every single episode that we did, and that was taking a lot more time than made sense for us. So we stopped doing that. We made a few changes to it, and we now, we're doing more with our video files instead, with our clips and how we're sharing those and interacting with them there. So we've made a lot of those little changes along the way. We've added a lot of templates in, a lot of process in to improve things and to make it more seamless. But every time we've done that, we've said, hey, what's working really well? Where are those pain points? Hey team, how long is it taking you to do XYZ step? How long is it, how long are we taking to think through different topics? Or how's our guest process looking? Do we need to make improvements there? I think it's really important. And Paul is saying, which I completely agree with, keep it simple until you have the basics down, then layer things on
Hmm.
and see what you can add. But you can't, it's easy to do everything because everything is available, but really thinking through what's important to you and to what you're trying to accomplish is what's
Yeah,
going to keep you
that's
on
like
track.
Yeah, that's like trying to mitigate or tone down the squirrel mentality of like the shiny
Totally
object,
guilty of
syndrome. Like,
yeah.
ooh, what's that?
Yeah.
And that happens to all of us. Like, we see the latest and greatest and we're like, ooh, shiny. And we're thinking about it. But the way that I like to look at it is you need to reverse engineer what you want to get out of it. So, just
Yes.
the same
What's the
way,
end point?
what
Exactly.
is your final result, right? What is the
Yes.
end point? What is it that you want to get out of whatever it is that you're doing? And once you have that in mind, you're saying, now what are the like minimum system requirements that I
Yeah.
need to get
Yep.
that done? And if you
Yep.
take that approach, right, you're going to be so much better off because you're not going to have an excess of things, whether they're physical or digital, that you're not going to use. And I
Yep.
mentioned this, I don't remember, I think it was on the it was on the demo, the Ecamm demo
Oh
that we
yeah, our
did with
live demo.
Paul,
Yeah. Yep.
right? That it really sucks to try to sell something that you wouldn't use yourself, right? Like when you
Exactly.
find something, you're like, that was such a piece of crap, but I paid $200 for it. And now I'm going to try to get as much out of it, like back
Yeah.
because I'm not going to use it, but I
Yeah.
have to sell it to someone in a smile and tell them like, it's a piece of junk.
Yeah.
It's really tough, right? To say
Yeah.
like, hey, I got scammed for 200, so now let me try to push this scam on over to you, right? It's so hard to do that. That's why I take that approach of being kind of like minimum system requirements, And if you are able to get something a little bit better, hey, more power to you. But just know that it needs to fit your flow
Yeah.
and do what you needed to do. And sometimes nothing more than that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, not always, but
Exactly.
sometimes.
Yeah, it is amazing how overcomplicating it, it may seem like a really good idea, and then it can cause just so much extra heartache at, having 2 cameras, 3 cameras, 4 cameras, that's 4 cameras where things could go wrong, right? Like, so any
Or
one of
failure
those,
points.
yeah, more failure points. It's the same way with all the cool technology that's now built into, cars and phones and all of these different tools. The more that we are adding into it, yes, they do all of these amazing things, but but they do have a ton more failure points and a ton more things that constantly need to be updated or changed. And it's the same with Ecamm. The more features that we're adding into it, the more things that could cause confusion, that could overwhelm people as they're trying to figure out what they need to do. So even with a tool like Ecamm, where we've made it really, really easy, sometimes you have to close a few of those windows and focus on what you want to create that, particular day, and don't get caught up in every single thing that, that something can do. Make the tools work for you. And if they are not working for you, get rid of those tools and find the tools that work best for you, and really try to keep it as simple as you can.
I have to
Um,
tell you that that last comment really hit home because I'm such a car
that's
person,
awesome.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now cars have
Oh,
updates, right? Like, oh,
yeah.
did you update your car? Oh, I don't know if you have all the latest safety features or the latest and greatest. I'm like, what? I remember when you used to upgrade the car by the model year. Like, hey,
Yeah,
you got the new model. This one
exactly.
has like cruise control. Like now, it's like now cars have updates like your iPhone, and it is crazy. I do feel like I want that simplistic aspect back into the vehicle, right? Where
Yeah.
you just turn it on and it works.
And it's
That's it.
always like, I wanna say this, I know I say this probably too much, but it's always okay to change. It's always okay to make a change.
Mhm.
Marshall is a great example of this. If you watch our,
Yeah,
Marshall Creates series on YouTube,
his new
Marshall
setup.
has always, yeah, had this incredible studio. We've done, like, tons of videos on how amazing and incredible his studio space was, and he moved. He decided to move his family, from Baltimore to Florida, and they have this completely different space now. And he, for a while, was staying in like different Airbnbs as they were, figuring out where their next steps were and where they were going to settle down. And now he's like, all of the things that were really, cool and people really loved about that studio space didn't actually work for him. Like, it looked really cool, but he wasn't using half of the stuff that was there. He really wants to change up how he's doing it. And so, he's just rebuilding, and he's taken note of all the things that work really well and all the things that didn't work so well. And he's just walking through the process. And I love that he's doing it publicly so we can all learn with him throughout that process. But even if he wasn't, I just think it's really good for us to all say, like, hey, just because you built it a particular way, even if it's working to some level and people really like it, if it's not working for you, it's not worth it. Make a change and make those tweaks. And it's okay you're not failing or doing it wrong by saying, oh, I've reevaluated this and now I want to move my camera over here. Or, I thought about it and actually, like, I didn't need this giant light that I bought. So I'm going to sell that and, and reinvest that into a different tool. Or, really constantly evaluating kind of where you're at and if it's working is really important. And it's something I think we as a team do really well at Ecamm, and certainly on the flow. But it's just a good reminder for all of us that I think sometimes we think that it's like, it's got to be this way because I've invested this time and I've, said that my space looks this way or said that my podcast is doing this thing. You can make those changes. No one's gonna judge you for it. No one's thinking that you've failed if you make some changes or switch it up, to be better at what you're doing. I think it's really important. I'm just scrolling through a few last questions here. As usual, I blink in the
Hmm.
hour, and our hour is
Well, we do
almost
have
done.
this one that I think we skipped over from Roy. It says,
Oh
for my
no, Roy, I'm
podcast,
sorry.
it's it is simply the audio form, my video. I feel bad not removing references to stuff on the screen from the audio. Does other
Oh,
edit?
this is a great question. Do other editors edit out some of those aspects where it made sense on video, but maybe doesn't make sense on audio. Um, I think that this is a really great question, and I am doing that for my personal podcast. So as I said at the beginning of this episode, for the podcast that we're doing, I try very hard not to, because I know I have an only episode audio only listeners, and I'm not doing any editing whatsoever of that video file. Like, I'm streaming and then I'm just taking that through and sending it. I try to be a little bit cautious of talking through or saying out loud things that I'm visually showing on screen, and we try our best to do the same thing here with the flow. I think if you can get in the habit of doing that, then it doesn't matter as much whether or not you're editing or spending a ton of time editing those things out. If there is an episode where it's just really heavy on visual demonstrations or something that you're really walking through, you might just want to consider not releasing that out as a podcast episode, and just, maybe you just record some quick audio that says like, hey, we just released episode 36, and we did a really like hands-on workshop, and if you want to catch all of the details of that, I urge you to join us over on YouTube or Facebook or wherever your video is sitting, so that you can see through everything. And if you have any questions about this topic, I'd love to hear from you. Send it over to my email or whatever your connection is for people to reach out to you. You could have a separate kind of mini explainer as to what you did audio only episode to point people back to the full video. But I don't think that means you have to change your process and be heavily editing your video. I think you just need to approach the audience a little bit differently, keeping in mind that a listening audience is just going to be a bit different than a video audience. That's my answer anyway. I don't know what you would say, Luis. What do you think?
I think that was great advice. But just for instance, like to add to that, yeah, try to be as narrative as possible. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're a narrator telling a story, and just try to have that in your conscious, in the back of the mind, that if you're showing something, it's kind of like show and tell. But in
Mm-hmm.
podcasting, you need to tell, because you cannot show,
Because you
right?
cannot show. Yep.
And that's where you have to have it. But as an editor, I do edit the podcast, and unfortunately, there has been times where I have cut that out, right?
It's
Because
on the
it's
floor.
completely visual, exactly, and it's like snip,
Yeah.
snip, and it's gone. And then the hardest part for me is to edit the transition from like two completely
Mm,
different parts of the conversation,
yeah.
and make that flow by removing it and not being just like jarring from one conversation, no answer, or basically no explanation, and then the next question or the next conversation point.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, to try to see if you can fix it by making it in a like comprehensive audio experience.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, then you might just need to remove that whole section, or like Katie said, make that one a just an audio or visual only
Video only
podcast, where
episode. Yeah.
you only direct the people saying, hey, sorry, here's the link, but this is way too like, it's a demonstration and you would need to see it. There's no way to make it audio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So great
Yeah,
points.
I mean, yeah, and I would say the question back to you, Roy, is, do you want to edit? Is it something that you want to do? If it is, then, take those steps to work towards that. And if it's not, then just make a couple of tweaks to how you're sharing the information initially, so that you can appeal to both those audiences. But yeah, I would say,
Yeah.
there's nothing that says you have to.
You
Really,
s-
I mean, it's your podcast, right? So
I'm gonna
close
share
your
this.
ears, cover your ears.
I'm gonna share this with you guys, right? Because this is something that hit me today, and I was like, the difference between like just producing, like you say, you have the conversation with your friend on Thursdays, the
Yep.
VHS podcast, right? No
Yep.
edits, because it's just conversation out the door.
Yep.
Me, I would consider myself an artist, right?
Yeah.
Because the acronym is anal retentive tendencies,
So
and that art
yeah.
is what I'm sharing with you guys. Like, I have
Oh,
to edit. Like, I have to just
yeah.
like, no, let's remove that. No, and those tendencies, my art, is definitely what makes me do all those edits and be like, you know what, I couldn't make it comprehensive, and I'll do it. But that's 100% my nature, and that's my own personal problem.
Well,
So
that's honestly why I'm not doing a ton of editing on the VHS Club podcast, because
it's just a
I just
conversation.
know that, like, I only have so much time, and I'm lucky enough at work to have you as my editor. So even though it would be really fun to learn how to edit and probably beneficial in a number of different ways, that would be taking my time away from other
Absolutely.
personal and professional projects that I would rather do. And so it was funny because I was listening to friends talking about, how much like it was taking them all weekend to edit this podcast, because they really just really wanted it edited. And but it felt like it was this added pressure of something that they didn't really want to do and didn't really actually need to do. Like, if they made a couple of changes or just agreed that it was okay if it was a little bit more raw, it would probably be a relief. But they have this pressure, as I think many of us face, that, like, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be in this particular format that we've heard, when we were listening to radio shows, or some of these other, like, very, very produced podcasts. And that's fine if that's what you want to do, but then you need to accept that that's going to be that amount of time. If
Hmm.
that's not really what you want to do, but just what you think you should do, it might not be worth it. So, like,
Exactly.
at least not for a personal podcast is all I'm saying. Like, if everyone out there is, working on, like, professional work related podcasts, and you really you have a very set goals, and you have, a management team that is, watching you, in a budget that, you need to be hitting, totally, I absolutely get it. Then hire an editor to help you out with it, or, really figure out how you can do those skills. But I think a lot of us do it because it's the quote unquote, like, thing we should do. And I'm what I would say back is it, does it need to be?
Exactly.
Or is
Back
it, or are you just thinking about it too much?
Yeah, back to that system, minimum system requirements, right? Like, is
Exactly.
it like, do you really need that? Is that what's stopping
Exactly.
this from being produced? And with me, unfortunately, it is. That's why I said it's a
Yeah, so
personal
Luis, you
problem.
go ahead. Yeah.
Like, it's that thing that you say, like, when you see something, you can't unsee it. That's me
Yep.
with editing. Like, I see
Yeah.
something, like, I know I have the power to fix it. So I'm going to have to fix it. And that has to do with my art, my
Well,
anal
and also,
retentive tendencies.
it does. Also, I would say that in your case, your whole brand and what you're trying to, to convey and to teach people and to share, and your passion is on, on camera quality and videography and editing. And so you're sort of, in many ways, not to support your your
Yeah,
art,
yeah.
but I think, like, your art is also part of your brand and what you're trying to convey. So I would say in your case, it actually does make sense. And I think
Hmm.
being meticulous about it also allows you to be able to answer questions like you did today on this podcast, and, be an expert in that field and help others who are trying to get into that space know how they can consistently release quality content. And maybe, how can we as perfectionists find those, like, time saving hacks in those spaces. But yeah, understanding, I think, where what your goals are and what your passion is, and, where what your art is.
Hmm.
What your art is
I
important.
literally came up with that acronym
I
this
love
morning,
it.
and I was
I
like,
love
that is so awesome. That needs to be on a shirt.
it. It
But that's
does.
why I said I was going
Charitable.
to share it
Yeah.
with you guys because it was fit perfectly. I'm like, yes, support your art, right?
Shirtable. I love it. All right. Last question, and then I'm hoping that Paul can help me with this because I was dumb and did not get this in advance. But last question is seeking clarity. In essence, we can live stream in either horizontal or vertical, but there's no way to reformat the Ecamm elements live for each. If I'm understanding your question correctly, there is currently no way, if you are live streaming in 16:9 horizontal format, to switch the formats back and forth while you're living. So while you're live streaming, there's no way to go horizontal, vertical. You can't switch back and forth. That is correct. You can opt for one or the other. If you opt to stream or record videos in vertical format, Ecamm will still save the widescreen format. So, like, if you're trying to switch back and forth between the two of them, I would suggest playing around and testing with streaming or recording video in vertical format and seeing what the output and that experience is like. You're gonna have to kind of watch, what's in that vertical space versus what's outside of that vertical space, but Ecamm will record or stream in the wide version to the platforms that support that and the vertical versions to the platforms that support that. So
Yep.
hopefully that answers your question. Again, testing and practicing and playing is really important to try to get that output that you're looking for. But that would be my answer to you, Bonfire Sports. Thank you so much for hanging out and for asking all of these amazing questions.
The only other thing that I would add to that is just it also depends because with Ecamm, another little added feature is that you can multi-stream. So
Mm-hmm.
now you can multi-stream a
Yes.
wide angle aspect to YouTube
Yeah.
and then still multi-stream a vertical that will be
Yes.
automatically converted to Instagram. And
Yes.
then you will still have your recorded isolated file once it's all said and done.
True.
So depending on the destination, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, so on and so forth, and how you're connecting to it, that will automatically convert your file that you're
Yeah.
producing to its regulations. So like I said, if you're on YouTube, you're on Facebook, it'll be wide because that's their format. And
Mm-hmm.
then with the multi streaming to multiple destinations, TikTok, so on and so forth, those will come forth to vertical on their own.
Yes, absolutely. Ah, we did it, Luis. We answered all of the questions. Thank you to all of our live flow riders for hanging out and asking such amazing questions. We will repurpose this into a replay video and audio format next
And
week
there
where
this is.
everyone will be able to hang out and grab any of the content for this. You can always find our podcast episodes flow.ecamm.com. We are wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And you can also reach out to us directly by email, flow@ecamm.com. That's ECAMM.com. We'd love to hear your questions. We have what's called a volley. If you're not familiar with volley, it is an asynchronous video platform. It'll like actually record video questions or video comments and chat back and forth with us that way. So if you have a question and you want to show us something or you want to send it in a video format, we really encourage that. You can find us on Volley. And then huge thank you to our sponsors, Descript. We use this tool. I don't know. I think I use it every day, multiple times a day at this point. It is a easy video editor. It also helps us get our transcripts for our podcast so that we can use those for closed captions. We can clip up our videos and we can just do a ton when you're able to edit a video like you edit a Word document is their slogan, and I think is really accurate to it. So if you're looking for simple editing, Descript is absolutely the way to go. And if you're still hanging out with us here and you are in the live chat, I just want to remind everyone, hopefully Paul can drop a link for me. One of our Ecamm fan members, Hank, unfortunately suffered a huge, horrible fire at his house and studio last week. So we are raising funds through a GoFundMe to try to help get him back on his feet and help him get back to live streaming and recording video. So if you feel so inclined, we'd love your support. Thank you so much to everyone who has given already. It's just been, as usual, just humbling to be part of this space. But here's to Hank. We are going to help Hank get back up on his feet. The link is in the chat right now if you want to be able to support this cause. But we're just so thankful that he is safe, and yeah, and are looking forward to helping him to rebuild. And huge thank you to our friends both at Shure and at Elgato who are also donating gear to Hank, which is just so incredibly nice. This community really does come together and helps in a variety of ways. So thank you to all of our Flow Riders. And then last update, we have Flow Rider t-shirts that are hitting the Ecamm merch store. So we'll be able to do some fun giveaways soon. But if you can't wait for a giveaway and really want to go and grab one, they should be up on the site by hopefully the end of today. You can find that at merch.ecamm.com is where our merch store is. And we promise that you don't necessarily have to buy them because we will be giving them away as well. So looking forward to that and donning our fun flow t-shirts. Luis will make sure we get you one as well for your behind the scenes swag.
I'm excited. I didn't know that that was happening, so that's
Yeah,
cool. I'm going to
surprise.
check them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from all of us here and from Doc, who is angry that we changed this day and time
He'll get
in
over
San
it.
Diego, we miss you, Doc, and we will see everyone next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, 12 p.m. Eastern, even with the time change, 12 p.m. Eastern here on YouTube if you want to be in our live audience. Otherwise, catch it whenever works for you, either on YouTube or swing over to your favorite podcast player. But thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.